I went to a show, an event, a live show. Um, I watched a horror show, horror movie from like the 50s. I watched some um, pro wrestling, WWE. Shout out to Bianca Belair. Bianca Belair, shout out to Bianca Belair. I watched some Plimp Tunes, the Urantia Book. This is the foreword. The foreword is the most complicated part of the Urantia Book. The Urantia Book. The foreword, I believe the foreword came after the rest of the book was written. After the rest of the book was written, I think then the authors of this book, the Urantia Book, gave the foreword. So it's the most complicated part of the book, I suppose. For sure, it is. In terms of what it says, Section 0, in the hope of facilitating comprehension and of preventing confusion on the part of every mortal who may peruse these papers, we deem it wise to present in this initial statement an outline on and on. It's just going to say a lot of stuff about, in the Urantia Book, it'll say, we're presenting this information, something, formal statements like that, in an effort not to confuse Urantian mortals, something. There's more than one time they say things like that. It is exceedingly difficult to present enlarged concepts and advanced truth in our endeavor to expand cosmic consciousness, ... What they want to say there. This is this is the real, the complete, this is the beginning of the book, the introductory to the book, the Urantia Book. But then right after they make some statements that are fairly easy to understand in terms of what they're trying to say here in these paragraphs. So like the last paragraph in section 0, which comes before section 1, an introductory section. Section 0 is the introductory section on all the papers. And all the papers of the Urantia Book, this part here is titled the foreword. So it's not one of the papers, it's the foreword. The 7 evolving super universes in association with the central and divine universe we commonly refer to as the grand universe. These are the now organized and inhabited creations. They're all part of the master universe. So, I mean, in a sentence or two, within a paragraph or as a paragraph, all of creation can be summed up, and they do it more than once. They do it more than once. They do it here and there, now and then. I mean, I could say the Urantia Book says that in potential there are 7 trillion human evolutionary spheres similar to this world Urantia in some stage of evolutionary creation, or not started yet at all. In the grand universe is the evolutionary universe outside of Paradise Avona, the perfect Paradise Avona, where Avona has 1 billion perfect planets. Avona is the home of the Trinity, the gods, the 3 eternal gods, and many, many other beings, of course. There are three rings of planets around Paradise. For the the innermost ring would be the Universal Father. Then the rings, the ring of planets, 7 planets of the eternal Son, the ring of planets, 7 planets of the infinite Spirit. These are big, long topics in the Urantia Book. Papers describe all this type of stuff in detail. But all of creation can be summed up fast in terms of a sentence or 2 or 3. The 1 billion perfect spheres of Havona come after those 3 rings I was talking about around Paradise. And the grand universe is the evolutionary creation. And then outside of the evolutionary creation, there's 4 more outer space levels, is what the Urantia Book talks about. That would be the master universe. So they give terms to all these different sections of creation, all these different sections of creation the Urantia Book gives names to. Section 1, Deity and Divinity. So it's going to start using words like self-existent, and it's just going to use words that aren't necessarily common words in English, but they're trying to express ideas. So I'll just read something and just try to make a comment on it. Deity is personalizable as God is pre-personal and super-personal in ways not altogether comprehensible by man. Deity is characterized by the quality of unity, actual or potential. On all supermaterial levels of reality. And this unifying quality is best comprehended by creatures as divinity. On and on, a tremendous number of sentences and paragraphs just like that throughout the entire foreword. The foreword is a fairly long section of the book. There are 12 sections in the foreword, and a lot of the sentences kind of sound like that, or even more, I don't know, more difficult to understand in terms of the words they choose to express their ideas here in the Urantia Book. Yeah, so here we go. God is pre-personal, God is super-personal. I mean, for me, I mean, I'm very familiar with the foreword. I could make a comment on any sentence in it. But I would say that the Universal Father, I would sum it up like this. The Universal, sum it up, whatever. The Universal Father stands alone. The Universal Father, the unfettered will of the Universal Father, the first person of the Trinity. He stands alone. Nothing compares to the first person of the Trinity in any way, not even the second two persons of Deity. In my mind, the way I read the Urantia Book, sort of, kind of, not even the second two persons of Deity, and then certainly nothing outside of the Trinity compares in any way to the first person of the Trinity. To me, that's one of the ideas the Urantia Book is putting forth. They do it seemingly a lot in the foreword. They also do it throughout the book, especially the early parts of the book, about the Universal Father, the Eternal Son, and the Infinite Spirit, the three names given to the eternal deities. So the Universal Father, from the Universal Father's perspective, everything is timeless in the sense of finished, in the sense of perfect. So God knows everything from the beginning to the end in its perfection in every moment. However, there is what also exists in terms of time, time, human evolutionary will beings, evolutionary creation exists. But the Universal Father knows everything from a timeless, perfect standpoint to the end of the Master Universe, whatever the end of the Master Universe is. God knows all of creation in its perfection. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of information about this. Any of it. So I don't know. Paragraph 11, section 1. The finite level of reality is characterized by creature life and time-space limitations. Finite realities may not have endings, but they always have beginnings. They are created. The deity level of supremacy may be conceived as a function in relation to finite existences. I mean, back earlier there, God is pre-personal and super-personal. I mean, the one important thing about pre-personal is the thought adjuster, the will of God, the spirit of God in the human mind. In every normal-minded human being, there is a thought adjuster, the spirit of the first person of the Trinity given to that mortal an individual spirit given to an individual mortal in that mortal's mind. And they call this spirit pre-personal, which to me means it can't do anything but the will of God. It's not, it doesn't have free choice in that sense. That's sort of kind of what it means to me. It's a big topic in the Urantia book as far as what thought adjusters are, what they do, things of this nature. But other pre-personal things about the universal Father, the first person of Trinity, I don't know. They talk about, I think they talk about pre-personal beings on the planets of the eternal sun, the planets that the second circuit around paradise in the Urantia book, the planets of the eternal sun. I think they say something about have a tremendous number of pre-personal beings on them. No personal being has ever visited one of the planets of the eternal sun, ever. I believe there's a sentence like that. I'm quite sure there's a sentence like that. What that means in terms of eternity, the next outer space level, the master universe. I don't know, but it has something to do with that, I suppose. Super personal, I don't know. I mean, if I read enough sentences in the foreword, I can come up with statements about what I think it means. But that's a tough one. Super personal, as far as God, the universal Father being super personal. I don't know. I'm thinking about, like, maybe they mentioned a spirit called a gravity messenger, which is still pretty much completely personal. I'm paraphrasing the Urantia book, but can virtually instantaneously go from one section of creation to any other section in creation. I think the gravity messengers can do this. They are personal, but not quite completely personal. I'm paraphrasing because they say, like, for a real personal being to go from one part of the creation to any other part of the creation, a solitary messenger is a truly personal being that can travel at phenomenal speeds to go from one part of the creation to another in terms of bringing a personal message or bringing a personal presence from one part of the creation to another part of the creation for a reason. They give the number of how fast solitary messengers travel. It's, I don't know. It's the speed of light is the average speed for a spirit being, I believe, at least a seraphim. I'm not sure about the other spirit beings, the higher spirit beings, but then they'll say something like a seraphim can travel at 3 times the speed of light under certain circumstances. I think a seraphim or some other angel or something, some being can travel at 3 times the speed of light, whatever. It's in the Urantia book. And then a solitary messenger, they give this giant number about how fast a solitary messenger can travel. So I would say something like, 100 times the speed of light, whatever the number is. I have no idea. It's something like that. It's just a big number as far as traveling, but a personal being that can travel. So anyway, the universal Father, in terms of super personal, I don't know. This is definitely the hardest part of the book to really understand what they're trying to say, comprehend, and make comments on. I mean, it makes sense. It always makes sense. The Urantia book in the forward here, it always makes sense, but not much to really comment on. Sometimes, in a sense, in a way. So, like here, this paragraph 13 says the absolute level is beginningless, endless, timeless, and spaceless. Okay, so God knows everything in perfection in terms of timelessness, things of this nature. Time and space are non-existent on paradise. The central creation in all of creation is the planet paradise, but they do say it's made of a physical material. I mean, they say, there's a lot of information here in your Urantia book about all these types of ideas and subjects and topics. This one here, the absonite level. So paragraph 12 brings in a word that doesn't have a real definition in English. It probably has no definition in English, but they're bringing in a word that they feel they have to use to explain what they want to explain. So paragraph 12 says the absonite level of reality is characterized by things and beings without beginnings or endings, and by the transcendence of time and space. Absoniters are not created, they are eventuated, they simply are. So, what does that mean? So, I don't know. To me, that means the beings that are so close to deity in terms of high authorities that are like right outside the authority of the Trinity themselves. So those beings are absonite beings or eventuated, however the Urantia Book expresses it, like the architects of the master universe. These beings are one of the highest beings out in terms of authority and creation and things of this nature, right outside of the Trinity themselves. Eternals of days, but then all of Havona and Paradise. The supreme being, and then like they'll probably be, the British book isn't real explicit about it, but it makes sense that for the next outer space level, there will be an eventuated ruler in terms of the supreme being is currently being created to rule the grand universe when the grand universe is settled in light and life. Light and life being another topic in the Urantia Book, but so then it makes sense that there would be a being who will be eventuated, created, but they're already sort of in existence because they're so close to the highest authority of the Trinity themselves. Next outer space level would get a being similar to the supreme being in terms of that being ruling the next outer space level when that outer space level is settled in light and life. There's a lot of good sense. It's worth reading. It's worth knowing. It's worth taking in this information just to get an understanding of the highest understanding of truth, reality, creation, things of this nature. Even if it can't really be fully understood in terms of what they're really saying, just taking in the information is a very good thing to understand the big picture of everything. There's a lot of sentences in here, so a lot of paragraphs. So here's one at the end of section 1. When we attempt to conceive of perfection in all phases and forms of relativity, we encounter 7 conceivable types. 1, absolute perfection in all aspects. 2, absolute perfection in some phases and relative perfection in all other aspects. And they go on with 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, similar to the first 2. It's good information. Section 2, God. That's the name of the section 2. In the foreword, paragraph 2, cosmic consciousness implies the recognition of a first cause, the one and only uncaused reality. God, the universal Father, functions on 3 deity personality levels of subinfinite value and relative divinity expression: pre-personal, personal, and superpersonal. Well, here they're given the definition of superpersonal. So while I couldn't remember anything about it, I should say that throughout the foreword, they'll give definitions for all these new terms that they're bringing into existence, at least in this book. Like they'll define it. So superpersonal means as in the eventuated existences of certain absonite and associated beings. So those beings, to me, what they're saying throughout the book, in parts of the foreword and other places, again, those eventuated beings, those beings that are so high in authority and so close to the Godhead, to the 3 members of the Trinity, that they're not exactly created. They're more or less eventuated. They call them absonite, apparently. So the universal Father and the eternal Son create creator sons. Creator sons are local universe rulers. Michael of Nebanon is a local universe ruler, creator son. He bestowed himself on this world as Jesus of Nazareth. The second person of the Trinity, the eternal Son, and the infinite Spirit, the third person of the Trinity, create magisterial sons, such as myself, or avonal sons. And I'm currently the sixth epical revelation on this planet as an avonal son, as a male child born of woman. That's what I'm currently doing. Jesus of Nazareth is the first bestowal son on this sphere in terms of bestowal sons as they're discussed and defined in the Urantia Book. And I personally am the second bestowal son here on this planet. Yep. The term God, as we make use of it, may be understood. So again, this is the Urantia Book, paragraph 7. This is actually paper 0. Paper 0 comes before the first paper. The foreword is called paper 0. And this is section 2, paragraph 7. The term God, as we make use of it, may be understood by designation as God the Father, by context as when used in the discussion of some one deity, level, or association. When in doubt as to the exact interpretation of the word God, it would be advisable to refer it to the person of the Universal Father. So the Urantia Book uses great English. It's in English. It's great English. It's very understandable in a sense, as far as English words strung together to make English sentences in the English language and paragraphs in English. It's easy to understand anywhere in this book from that standpoint. Even the foreword, is in English. It's fairly easy to understand just from an understanding English standpoint. Exactly what they're trying to say in terms of ideas, the foreword is probably the toughest part to really figure that out, exactly what they're trying to say about the real truth of all of creation. It's definitely the hardest part to understand as a total section of the book. So I guess, so they're saying when reading this book, when reading the Urantia Book is saying, when reading the Urantia Book, if you're not exactly sure how they're using the word God, it would be advisable to refer it to the first person of the Trinity, the Universal Father. That's what they're saying. So this is an introduction to the Urantia Book, the foreword. So they're explaining their book. They're trying to give an understanding of the terms that they'll be using throughout the book and how they should be read, how these terms should be read, defined, interpreted, understood, things of this nature. So the term in the Urantia Book here, it says the term God always denotes personality. Deity may or may not refer to divinity, personality. So deity, although apparently it always refers to personalities, I'll say the word deity always refers to personalities in the Urantia Book, but they'll use that term to describe beings outside of the Godhead, the three members of the Trinity, on occasion for certain high beings. Just on and on. It's fairly technical stuff. Section 2, paragraph 18, the last paragraph in section 2, God the Absolute, the experimentalizing God of transcended superpersonal values and divinity meanings, now existential as the Deity Absolute. This is the third level of unifying deity expression and expansion. So they're going to go on and on here about what they want to say. I think coming up here, if not already, and further along in the foreword, they get a lot into this idea of aside from the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Spirit, they will talk about the Deity Absolute, the unqualified Absolute. The unqualified Absolute might have something to do with strictly the physical creation. The deity absolute is strictly personal creation. And then they bring in a third name similar to that for the synthesizing of the two, I think. Throughout the forward, this will occur a lot. As I'm looking at this here, what that means, like God the Absolute, the experientializing God of transcended superpersonal values in divinity meetings. They're talking about the end of creation. To me, there will be 7 outer space levels to me, and each outer space level will get a eventuated, created ruler, which that ruler won't come into personal existence in that evolutionary outer space level until that outer space level is settled in enlightened life. But each outer space level will get one. And then the 7th outer space level is the ultimate, the completion. They use the word, the absolute. They use the word ultimate, to me, to describe the outer space level eventual rulers for all 6 outer space levels. And then the last outer space level would receive the ruler would be God the Absolute of the last outer space level. And what that means in terms of the completion, in a sense, of eternity, of the entire master universe. To me, that's the ideas they're trying to put forward. That's my interpretation. Not much of what I said is really in the Urantia book. They just give these, difficult to understand sentences and leave it at that. The 2 absolutes. Okay, so the third absolute that they bring into make many sentences about. They make many sentences about the deity absolute, the qualified absolute, and the unqualified absolute. Oh no, I'm sorry. Well, okay, the 2 absolutes, qualified and unqualified, are coordinated and unified in and by the universal absolute. So they the 3 terms that they'll use to try to describe all of physical creation and all of personal creation and the combination thereof. They'll use the term. I believe I think this is how they're putting it. The deity absolute describes all of the personal creation of the entire master universe. The unqualified absolute is the physical manifestation of all things and being all things, not all beings, all things. The unqualified absolute is gravity and things of this nature, everything that's physical in terms of the master universe. And the universal absolute is the coordinator between those 2 absolutes for personal beings and non-personal things. Sort of, kind of. I think. So the first source and center is another term they'll use for the universal Father, the first person of the Trinity. So the first source and center and the second source and center, the eternal Son, bring into existence creator sons, makers, rulers, and in this particular local universe, the sovereign Michael Son, or the Michael Son of this particular universe, is now sovereign after living his life as Jesus of Nazareth. The second source and center, the eternal Son, and the third source and center, the infinite Spirit, make magisterial sons such as myself. Magisterial sons such as myself are discussed in the Urantia book in terms of what I do. And currently, I as a vernal son, am on a bestowal mission right here on Urantia, the name of this planet, currently, as I speak. I think there's in paragraph 18, section 3 of the foreword. I think they're saying the deity absolute is the qualified absolute. So I think that's what they're saying. The first source and center is related to the universe as the gravity forces, the mind forces of the infinite spirit. The gravity forces, they list them 1 through 7. I don't think there's any real significance to 1 through 7. Like they're all sort of the same thing. It's not anyway, sort of same, whatever level. But first source and center is the gravity forces having to do with paradise, nether paradise, mind forces, the infinite spirit, spirit forces of the eternal sun. Deity action resides in the deity absolute. Infinity response exists in the unqualified absolute. So maybe the unqualified absolute is not just material. I don't know.